On my walk this morning, I saw some beautiful lavender crocuses, and that reminded me that spring is just around the corner, and that means it's time for adventure holidays, and I'm thinking today in particular about walking or biking holidays. One of the most popular episodes we cover are on doing the El Camino de Santiago. However, not everybody has time to walk, 40 days or so. What if instead you biked one of the more popular routes? That's what we're going to be doing today as we revisit one of my most popular Camino series, the Portuguese Way by Bike. And if you want to walk it, you'll still get some great information, so stay tuned. Hope you enjoy it. The Camino de Santiago, or the Way, is one of the world's most popular adventures. There are many ways or routes to Santiago de Compostela, and we've covered a few of them on the show. But today, we're examining taking on the challenge of the Camino in a totally different way. Instead of hiking the several hundred miles, our guest today tells us about how he biked the Camino, and in particular, how he biked the Portuguese Way from Porto, Portugal to Santiago de Compostela. And as an experienced Camino pilgrim, why our guest today feels it's the perfect way to take on this beautiful route. I can't wait to share it with you, so let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. Before we get started today, I want to tell you about an exciting project that my Costa Rica Camino hiking group is organizing and how the entire ATA community can make its mark building out the infrastructure of the new Costa Rica Camino. To date, less than 1,000 hikers have trekked this 175-mile trail that runs from the Caribbean to the Pacific. The folks that came up with the idea wanted to make an impact on some of the forgotten rural villages that were losing their children and therefore their communities to the cities where these kids are running to go get a job. So their idea was to create a long-distance trail through these rural villages, weaving them through these villages so that the locals could then build micro-businesses that would cater to the through hikers. These hikers are going to need food, they need shelter, they need little diversions. But at this point, because the trail is so new, some of the infrastructure is still pretty rough and not quite built out. And our group is helping to raise funds to help the local women at one of the later stops build a tent platform and a kitchen area so that these women can help support their families by providing us with shelter and meals. We also hope to replace a worn-out generator that powers a local clinic, providing its electricity and by pumping its water. Be a part of this amazing project by clicking the link on the show notes. Whatever you can contribute goes to help this win-win cause. And if enough of us contribute, we might also be able to help provide some seed money for improvements that will help some toilets and windows on some of the other overnight stops. I'd love to see this incredible ATA community work together to make an impact on one of the coolest projects and long-distance trails in the world. I know there are a lot of great causes out there, but I hope you'll consider finding space in your heart for this one. It's a wonderful way for the adventure community to help build sustainable adventure tourism. Thank you. And now, let's get on with my interview about biking the Portuguese Way. We've got Niall with us today who's going to talk to us about biking, not walking, but biking the Portuguese Camino. Welcome to the program, Niall.
Thank you very much, Kit. Nice to be here.
I appreciate you coming on. I got a question I'd like to ask everybody in the beginning, just so we have a sense of who we're talking to. If you could perhaps tell us your age, a little bit about yourself, and how you got into doing these adventure travels.
Well, I'm just coming up to 53, and I've always been interested particularly in cycling. And I think around about I was coming up to my 50th birthday, where I said I'd like to do something a little bit different, which might involve some exercise and some cultural stuff and a bit of sunshine. And I had seen a lot of things about the Camino. It's become very popular in recent years. So I thought that kind of fulfills many of those requirements that I had been looking for. And I said, again, the kids are getting a bit bigger and it was easier to go and take a week away and that kind of thing. So I said, I'll try and do a Camino.
And were you specifically looking, you said you like to do the biking. Are you an avid biker to begin with, or was this something you had trained to do, or how did all that work?
No, I wouldn't say I'm an avid biker. I mean, I cycle all the time and I enjoy cycling. Now, I don't like, I suppose, the really hard, full lycra mountain cycling seems to attract many of my compatriots. But I enjoy kind of relaxed cycling in casual gear, off-road preferably. So I was looking for something that would be challenging, but without being overly difficult, I suppose.
Now, you in Europe, you're based in Dublin. You have an opportunity that's a little bit different than here in the US. You've got routes, walking routes and biking routes all over the place. All these networks, of a lot of them, I guess, are former trade routes or whatever. So what made you choose the Camino in particular?
Well, to be honest with you, we have a lot of nice routes and greenways developing in Ireland in the last while, and I've ridden most of them, and they're very pleasant off-road. And one of the things about Ireland is the weather isn't always great, and I must admit I enjoy a bit of sunshine as well. And I think Camino just was attractive from that point of view, in terms of food and drink and culture and weather and nice off-road routes.
And from what I understand, the Portuguese Camino that you did, and we'll back in and describe it in just a minute, is probably one of the best routes to cycle. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I think so too. I've since been on a few different Camino trips, mostly along the Camino del Norte from the French border, but following the coastal route through Bilbao, Santander to Gijón, and then inland from there. So I'm attracted also by routes that are following the ocean as well. I enjoy having the sea on one side too. And, being able to take an opportunity to stop at a beach and perhaps go for a swim and that kind of thing as well is lovely.
Yeah, that is nice. In fact, actually, because I was actually supposed to walk from Porto into Santiago last April, but of course the COVID came around, so that's postponed indefinitely for me right now. But that was one of the things that appealed to me as well. And also, well, I guess we should back up. Tell us exactly where and describe the Portuguese Camino so people have a broad idea of what it is.
Okay, well, there's two different routes that constitute the Portuguese Camino. There's the traditional route, which is inland from Lisbon all the way up through central Portugal, crossing across the Spanish border and straight up to Santiago. And then there's also the coastal route, which is the one that I started in Porto, which I suppose is pretty well halfway between Lisbon and the Portuguese-Spanish border. It's manageable in a week. I think I did 8 days, if I remember, of cycling from Porto to the Spanish border and then onwards to Santiago.
That's cool. And Porto is a UNESCO World City, I guess it is.
It is. Yeah.
Can you describe that? Because that town itself really appeals to me. And how many days would you recommend somebody maybe hang out there before they hit the road?
Oh, absolutely. I would certainly suggest spend 2 or 3 days in Porto if possible. I just stayed overnight actually in Porto that time. I've been to Porto a couple of times in the past as well, so I'm pretty familiar with the city. And it is a beautiful city. On the one side, there's all those fabulous port houses, which were all part of the trade in port from the vineyards from the Douro River. An awful lot of nice buildings and cultural heritage stuff in Porto to see, and a very beautiful city, like 2 hills banking down to the river.
Now, they speak Portuguese, obviously, there. And I had thought that, because I speak mangled Spanish, that I would have no problem. But looking at the Portuguese language, it's quite different. Were there any kind of language barriers at all that you ran into?
Well, I don't speak Spanish or Portuguese. I understand a little bit of Spanish and have some basic communication skills in Spanish, but Portuguese is a very different language, all right. And, I think when you go to a lot of these places in Europe, particularly the cities, you'll find that many people are able to speak to you in English as well. But, I think we all get by when we travel.
And so before you even started on your adventure, did you do any extra training, or did you feel like you were fit enough with just your regular biking, or what did you do to prepare yourself?
Yeah, I did a little bit more than possibly usual. For maybe a month or 6 weeks before I started, I kind of worked on sort of a structured cycling at the weekends before I went, just to try and build up my mileage and to make sure that I got out once or twice every weekend. Whereas I'm at that time of the year, I went in April. Coming up to April, again, depending on the weather, I wouldn't necessarily be out on the bike all that much at that time of the year, but I would have made an effort in advance of that trip to get out probably twice a week, to do maybe one long cycle and one shorter cycle, maybe do a 40 or 50 kilometer cycle and maybe do a 10 or 20 kilometer cycle as well. But I think I do enough cycling that I was fit enough for it, in fairness.
And I found too, on a bike ride that I did, you really need to condition your bottom too, because it gets sore if you're sitting on that saddle a long time. So you just can't say, oh, I'm really fit, I can go do that. You need to not just condition your lungs and your legs, but also your butt.
Yes, that's often the breaking point for me actually as well. And To be honest about it, around about 70 or 80 kilometers is probably my limit from that point of view. I probably am fit enough to do a little bit more, but I find it's hard to sit down again the next day if you go too far over that distance.
Right. How long do you recommend people for their training long bike rides? Should they go longer than expected? I think the longest day was like 65 kilometers, which is around 40 miles.
Yeah.
Should you do longer than that so that it seems easy for you?
I would have thought if you were able to do consistently 40 to 50 miles, you should be okay, you know.
How about the path itself? How difficult is it?
Well, the path is fabulous, actually, for most of the way. It's almost, certainly the Portuguese part of it is almost entirely off-road. A combination of paved paths, but also kind of wooden boardwalks, and it's shared with those pilgrims who are also walking. So you're not contending with traffic a lot of the time, which is one of the really nice things about this route, I think. And it's typically you'll use a mountain bike type bike, and it can manage that kind of terrain without any problem.
Did you find it necessary gear-wise to wear biking shoes, or could you get away with trail runners, or can you talk about that, or did you use clip-ins?
No, I wore trail runners. I think you could certainly bring your own pedals, I suppose. You know, the bikes come packed flat when you hire them, and they're delivered to wherever your first hotel is usually. And having done it a few times now, it all works really well. So the bike comes flat. There's a little bit of setting up, including putting on the pedals, but I presume you could bring your own pedals as well if you had biking shoes. But I find for that kind of cycling, trail runners are fine. I don't think I need specialist cycling shoes.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that, because I'm doing my first biking tour myself to Croatia, and I only want to bring one pair of shoes because I'm hiking in the Dolomites first. So I'm going to bring trail runners. So you just answered a very important question for me. And one thing too, did you bring your bike? And also you went with Follow the Camino, one of my new affiliates, and they will provide the bike for you, or did you bring yours, or how did that work?
No, I organized the bike through Follow the Camino. I found that's worked really well for me because, well, certainly the bike I use here most of the time is probably not ideal for that kind of cycle. So the bikes they use are sort of hybrid mountain bikes with sort of wider tires, very comfortable. So it's very seamless. You don't have to be flying with the bike in your package and whatever. So it worked really well. The bike is delivered to the hotel. You put it together. You don't have to do very much putting it together. You put the pedals on, just turn the handlebars around to the right way, and away you can go in the morning. So it's not an intimidating assembly for somebody that, say, is scared of tools? No, it's a very straightforward assembly, and it's nicely explained in the information that comes with it. And you have a number you can call too anyway if there's a problem? Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Anytime I've had to call about any issue, actually, I've always had a very good response. What was the quality and condition of the bike? Well, I seem to be lucky in some way. Maybe it's because most of my trips have been at the start of the season. I almost always get a new bike. Oh, that's nice. Because, that particular one was, I think, end of March I started. So I would have been probably one of the earlier trips to the Camino. So perhaps they have a new setup at that stage. I think I've done one Camino then in sort of September, October time, and the bike wouldn't have been new. But they're perfectly mechanically put together. And, it didn't look brand new, but it ran perfectly. Okay, so somebody's doing a good quality inspection prior to. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Putting it in your hands. Well, that's good because you don't really want to break down on the road. And also for those that are intimidated, they do offer e-bikes. In fact, that's why I booked in Croatia, because I was a little intimidated. That way I have the option of a little extra power if I need it. Yeah. E-bike could be nice too. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about, they break down the Portuguese Camino into 5 stages because we don't have time to go through every day. Can you describe some of the highlights that you saw? Yeah, I think the first day, so I got on the bike in Porto and you get out of the city. I think they also suggest that it is possible you can take the bike on public transport on the metro system just to get to the edge of the city and you can begin then. But I decided to take it through the city and out. And you very quickly get past the outskirts and you arrive at the coast. And most of the Portuguese Camino is as I said, a paved pathway or beach boardwalk, more or less, along the coast. So you nearly always have a view of the ocean on your left-hand side as you're cycling away from south to north. So the first day, if I remember, I think most of my days are 50 kilometers, and I think I had one day which was a bit longer, maybe 80, and one day at the very end which is a little bit shorter, maybe 30. So, but 50 I think is a reasonable distance to be planning for in order to enjoy other aspects apart from just the exercise and the route itself. You know, it gives you a chance to get into a town, put your gear away, go and have a walk around, see what's interesting in the place, and maybe get organized, have a nice dinner then in the evening.
About how long are you on the bike on average each day?
Well, it depends. I mean, when you say 50 kilometers, I mean, you're typically maybe doing 10 to 15 kilometers an hour, I suppose, if you're taking it leisurely pace, which I think for most of these routes you will. It's not like on a road bike going 20 or 30 kilometers an hour. So typically I would be starting out at maybe 8 a.m. and I'd be aiming to be at my final destination sometime around about 2 p.m. or so. And that gives you an afternoon then to enjoy the sights, I suppose, of whatever town or city that you're arriving in, and then also to maybe have a little bit of a rest and get out for a nice meal in the evening.
And that's another good reason to train too, because you want to make sure that you're not so exhausted when you get there. You have the energy to go explore.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've had some days where things have turned out because you maybe take a wrong turn somewhere or you go wrong in some way. I mean, one of the days I had a puncture, so that'll slow you down as well. So you don't want to make your stages so long that if you do run into a problem, that you're going to end up having a real issue getting to your destination.
Gotcha. And I'm going to put a link to the episode that I did. And then also let's talk about when you said the puncture, what skills should we make sure we have before we attempt something like this? Because this is self-guided. You're not with a guide.
You're not with a guide, no. And so I think you probably should be able to fix a puncture on a bicycle if you're going to take a bike, for sure. Now, they have a pack that the bike is delivered with and you bring it with you. So it'll have a spare tube, it'll obviously have a pump, and you'll have a puncture repair kit. So I think if you have a puncture, you can just change the tube and pump it up again and away you go. But I think often is the time that that'll be just the day you get a second puncture. So you need to be able to fix it in case that happens before you can get yourself another spare tube.
I know there's got to be something on YouTube. I'll put links to those on the show notes too, so that you'll have all that, and probably how to put a chain back on and that kind of thing as well.
Yes, I suppose. Yeah, you'd need to know that too.
All right. So I'll put those on the show notes as well, so people will have a easy reference point of learning the main things that can go wrong on a bike. Every time I've been on one, I've been very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, most of these places too, you'll also find that if you're near a town when this happens or whatever, you'll probably find a bike shop who might be able to help you.
People are nice too. People will stop and help you, I'm sure, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us some more about some of the things that you saw. So we've left Porto.
So I left Porto and following up the coast, and really that whole northern coast of Portugal is just a long sandy beach almost entirely up the coast, and it's really very beautiful. And at that time of the year, the beaches were so quiet. Now I'm sure they're very busy in the summertime. It was April, it was quite warm and pleasant, but it wouldn't be lying out on the beach weather, you know. But that said, it was warm enough for me coming from Ireland that you would occasionally stop and you could have a swim or whatever. It was very pleasant, but almost nobody on the beach at that time of the year. Lovely and quiet, lovely and peaceful. Again, it wouldn't be one of the busiest of Camino routes, I don't think, also. So you meet people as you go along, but you don't meet hordes. But it's nice. And I think that's one of the nice things about the bike as well, is that you actually probably meet more people because you're moving a little bit faster. So you're not seeing the same groups. Or I think when you're walking, you meet groups on a day and you might walk with them for a while and that kind of thing. With the bike, you're kind of passing by people and you might meet them when you stop for a coffee, or you might meet them when you go to lunch. So I think you probably meet more people as you go along, but you probably don't spend as much time traveling with them then when you're actually moving.
Now, are you wearing the scallop shells so that people know that you're a pilgrim, or how does all that work? Can you even explain what the scallop shell is if somebody hasn't listened to some of the other programs?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I do. The scallop shell is symbolic, really, of the Camino de Santiago. So I suppose Santiago is the city where the relics of St. James the Apostle are interred in the cathedral there. And then the last stage of the Camino pilgrimage that people would do to Santiago would be to the coast, at Finisterre, which I suppose at that time in history was considered to be the end of the world. And a scallop shell would be the relic that you would pick up from the beach at Finisterre and prove that you had made the journey all the way to the end of the earth.
Cool. Janet, in one of our earlier episodes, who walked the Camino, she had one of the scallop shells attached to her backpack, so everybody could kind of see she was a pilgrim. Do bikers do that as well?
Yeah, I attach a scallop shell to the back of the bike. I think I have a photograph in the ones I sent you, the pictures that I sent you of the bike, and it has a shell attached to the backpack at the back.
Niall has generously given us lots of photos I'll also put on the website as well to get an idea of that. And so that same scallop shell, that's also the emblem or the trail marker. Is the paths easy to find, or can you get lost? Or tell us about that.
Yeah, I actually, it is a difference in biking compared to walking as well, because you're moving that bit quick. If you're not concentrating all the time, you can miss the way markers sometimes, which are often small. But obviously, when you're walking the trail, you see them because they're obvious and they're kind of at eye level and that kind of thing. But sometimes on the bike, you're looking around you and you're moving a bit quicker, and then you miss a left turn or a right turn or a straight on or whatever. So I find when I map my route, I find there's lots of little circles in it too in the middle where I might have taken a wrong turn. But again, it's one of the enjoyable things about the bike as well, is that you can afford to veer off course a little bit more. You've got more capacity to make it up later.
Right. And so do they provide you with a map or GPS coordinates, or how does all that work?
Yeah, the Follow the Camino, who I used to organize the trip, provide really good notes, both walking and cycling notes for all of the routes. You know, they've been really, really excellent and really detailed PDF documents with almost step-by-step directions and instructions.
And so you went at the very start of the season. They recommend the off season is November into March because that's the rainy season. I imagine a lot of the inns might even be closed. So you went at the start, goes all the way into the fall. Would you recommend doing the shoulder seasons?
Yeah, I would. I mean, maybe I went a little bit early, the first one, although the weather I got was really very good. I think that one was end of March, beginning of April, and the weather was really good. But I've also been on the Camino del Norte in May and September, and I've had an awful lot of rain on those trips sometimes. So it's hard to predict. I think in July and August, the weather will always be good. And for some, it may be too hot. And you'll also have more local tourists as well and local pilgrims. So they might be busier. So I think from that point of view, April, May, September, October are good times to go. But I think in the north of Spain, particularly, you find that the weather can be unpredictable as well. And you can get days and days of rain.
Yeah, well, it's always a good idea to keep a rain jacket in your day pack as well. Speaking of day pack, they move your basic luggage, and so you're just carrying along a day pack. Is that right, or how's all that work?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I tend to get my bag moved every morning, so I organise that as part of the whole trip, and I just carry maybe a change of clothes, some swimming gear, and maybe a few snacks and stuff. That's really all I carry.
Do you put it in panniers? Do you put it in a little day pack in your back, or how are you transporting it on the bike?
Yes, sorry. The bike is delivered with a pannier bag, so you don't have to carry anything on your back. You can carry it on pannier bags on the side of the bike, which is nice.
Nice. For those that aren't familiar with that term, could you describe what those are?
Well, it's a pack, I suppose, that sits at the rear rack behind the saddle, and it's two bags then kind of either side of the rear wheel.
All right, and I think they hold quite a bit too. So they hold your snacks and water.
Oh, there's loads of room. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be using the full capacity.
Speaking of food and water, are there plenty of places to stop along the way for lunch, or do you need to pack a lunch, or how does that work? And how is the food?
Again, any of these routes that I've done, there's loads of places to stop. There's always cafes and bars, and there's always places to get a food and drink as you go along Camino routes. The food is fabulous. That's all I can say.
By the coast, I imagine you're going to get some really fun things to eat. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I really enjoy about the Camino is the tapas type food that's popular in Spain. Small snack seafood and local sausages and cheeses. And I mean, the food is really, really good. And then when you're maybe having your main meal, the seafood on the Atlantic coast of Spain and Portugal is just fabulous.
That is actually a really good to have the tapas along the way. So you're always providing fuel, but not getting too full.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more about the landscape and some of the things that you'll see.
Yeah, so again, as I said, coming up the coast of Portugal, you've got the Atlantic Ocean on your left-hand side, and you've got a kind of sandy beach all the way along. There's probably more interesting or different in more interesting scenery on the inland route as well. It's more forests, I think, and
I think they have the forest and you'll go through some fields, some agricultural regions, some vineyards. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a matter of preference as well. But like I said earlier, I mean, I really do enjoy following the coast for all of the trips I've taken so far. And then at a certain point, I think it's a town called Camino, you meet the border with Spain, and it's the mouth of a river. So there is a town there, and there's a ferry service that gets you across the estuary of this river to into the Spanish territory. And so from there, you follow the Atlantic coast in Spain. And again, it's a little bit more rugged than the beach coastline on the Portuguese side as you come into Spain. It reminded me a lot of the west coast of Ireland, actually. We got into a whole lot of green fields and kind of rugged, I suppose, coastline. And again, and kind of wild sea, because it's full force of the Atlantic, particularly that time of the year, crashing against the coastline. I mean, it's great surfing country as well, the Atlantic coast of Spain and Portugal.
One of the things Umberto in an earlier interview mentioned was the wind. How big of a issue was the wind for you?
Yeah, it's one of the things that people need to consider probably about the coastal routes is that there's kind of an onshore wind nearly all the time, and it can be quite difficult, all right. It always seems to be against you, whichever way you're going. So if you get it when the weather is wild, the cycling is quite hard. And I can imagine that the inland route would be a little bit easier from that point of view.
Is it possible, because you're on a bike, to veer off and go inland? Let's say the weather's going to be inhospitable, and then still make it to your lodging?
Absolutely. I mean, I have done this at times on many of the different trips I've done, where you find perhaps the walking route that you might be taking is not as suitable for a bike, perhaps is a little bit too rocky, or, you know, they're not all kind of paved cycling type paths. So in those situations, yeah, I would always recommend that you might go for a normal national road, you know, and you can usually veer off at a certain point, follow a roadway and return to the track further along the line.
Does Follow the Camino give you those options in advance in case you need to make a decision?
They do. They usually have some comment on the quality of the track or the route that you're taking as well. And they will also have some suggestions as to what you might do. But like any of these trips, I think it's worth doing a little bit of research yourself as well, to be conscious before you go as to where you might need to think about those kind of issues.
That's great advice. Was it something that you'd wake up in the morning and say, it looks like this kind of a day, I think I'll do this, or how does all that work?
Yeah, that's how I tend to do it. I tend to not think about it too much before I leave, but then you're on your own. You have time in the evening. I tend to sit down in the evening for a little while and look at the maps, look at the instructions, and kind of make a plan for the following day.
You usually have an idea of the weather. Do you have reliable internet service throughout the trip, or do you have to really know that kind of information ahead of time?
The internet service was always excellent in any of the places I stayed. Now, I haven't used the pilgrim hostels in any of the trips. I tend to, I suppose, upscale to 2 or 3 star hotel for the benefit of having your own room and shower and bathroom and all of the rest.
And that's one of the nice things about Follow the Camino. They will tailor the trip to your budget. So if you want to do the pilgrims hostels, they'll do that. And that are very economical, but you're in a dorm situation with a bunch of people that are really tired because they've been hiking or biking all day. Or like you said.
Absolutely. I mean, I consider this as a holiday as well as anything else too. So I want to enjoy the comforts of that also. And I particularly after a long day out on the bike or walking, it's nice to be able to have a space that you can be on your own and relax.
True. And I think from what I could see too, that the accommodations can be more luxurious than the earlier. If you did the whole Portuguese Camino in the beginning, you might have some 2-star to 3-star, but then once you get to Porto, you have the option from the hostels all the way up to 4-star if you want.
Yeah, I think most of my accommodations along the Portuguese Camino were 3-star, and they were all really good, very nice.
I tend to be a 3-star traveler myself, but I'll do both. A little luxury every once in a while, just as a treat, and also if for whatever reason, I'll do the hostel too, often just for socialization. But speaking of socialization, though, you said that you got to meet a lot more people along the way. Do you get to meet a lot of locals as well?
Not so many. No, you don't really. You tend to meet pilgrims as you go along. I mean, you meet people, I suppose, in restaurants and shops, and you can get into conversations or whatever with people. But I think the people you tend to meet when you're walking or cycling the Camino are other pilgrims, really.
And are they from all over, or can you describe just from where some of the places the people came from?
Yeah, I mean, I've met people from everywhere on all of the trips. I mean, plenty from the US, Australians, South Africans, English, from all countries in Europe, Germans, French, Eastern Europe. I've met people, I've even met, I think, some Japanese, Koreans as well. So I've met people from all over on the different trips. I mean, I'm just remembering now on one stage of that Portuguese trip, which is the only time I ever did a whole section with somebody, was a guy I met who was also cycling from Uruguay, who had come to Europe, and he was cycling throughout all of Europe. So we had a really nice day together and cycled from start to finish one day, which was very pleasant, and he was good company.
Nice. And so you're doing this solo, correct?
I do it solo, yes. Yeah.
For dinner, are you usually eating solo, or do you join up with other people that you might have met along the trail, or how is all that working?
Yeah, it's a mixture, to be honest with you. You sometimes randomly, while you might sit on your own, you tend to be sitting perhaps outdoors somewhere in a town square or whatever, and you find the people at the next table are also traveling the Camino, and you get into a conversation with them. So I enjoy my own company too, so it doesn't matter to me which way it goes, and I enjoy meeting people as I go along as well, but I'm quite happy in my own company too. So I just take it as it comes. If somebody is sitting near me and we strike up a conversation, and it's interesting.
Nice. And all different ages, or did you see a certain category, or how would you describe the age groups?
Yeah, all different ages. I mean, there's people of all ages, but I would say a lot of people, particularly, I suppose, that time of the year as well, when you're on seasons outside the main summer season, tend to be an awful lot of people who are, I suppose, 50 plus, and 60 plus, people who are retired, people who are not working and can take time at that time of the year.
It's really good sense too. And also it won't be as crowded either, because in the summer,
definitely won't be as crowded. Yeah.
They tend to have off, and it's hotter.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're in June, July, August, you're into a school holiday season and family holidays, and the vast majority of people taking their holidays.
When you tell stories about your adventure, what are some of your favorite go-to stories?
Favorite go-to stories? I don't have any particular. I mean, it's funny, the random things that happen. I mean, one of the ones from the Portuguese Camino that I really enjoyed was I went in one of the towns. I think it was definitely on the Spanish side, to get my credential booklet stamped. Nice to get it stamped as you go along, to prove and to provide, I suppose, a memento of the places that you visited. And the guy who came to stamp it told me he was the local mayor for the town. We had a great chat about it. He could speak a little bit of English, and we had a nice chat about local politics in that part of Spain and the responsibilities of an elected official.
Did you find the locals welcoming to the pilgrims, or do they get jaded?
Very much so. No, I find generally people are very well disposed to pilgrims, yeah. I mean, it provides a livelihood for many people, I would imagine. I mean, these are parts of Spain and Portugal that maybe don't see a whole lot of visitors, particularly in the off-season times.
True. And you mentioned the pilgrim's passport. Could you describe that and what that is?
Yeah. In order to get your certificate of completion of the Camino, I think you have to have either walked 100 kilometers or cycled 200 kilometers of the final stage of the Camino to Santiago. So the booklet has space for you to get the official stamp from perhaps churches or hotels or bars, or most of the businesses, hospitality type businesses on the route will have a stamp, and they will provide proof of your transition through that part of the country. And when you arrive in Santiago de Compostela, you present your passport, and they scrutinize it to see that you have done the distance, the prescribed distance, in order to issue the certificate.
What does it feel like when you finally get there and see the cathedral?
It's great, actually. And, in some ways, I'm glad I did. My first Camino got me that sort of last bit into Santiago was lovely. So now I'm under no pressure to necessarily get to Santiago again, having already done it. I can take different sections from different routes, and do them at my leisure without being under pressure to get to Santiago necessarily again straight away. Yeah,
so tell us about the cathedral. What's the deal there?
Oh, the cathedral is a spectacular building, ancient church, and it's very beautiful. There's certainly been work going on it for the last few years, and I think it was under while I was there as well. I think it was closed for a period over the last couple of years and opening again now this year, my understanding is. But it's fabulous. I can't remember the date.
They do something interesting too with that, I forget the name of it, that smoking thing they push.
Yeah, kind of incense. Yeah. Yes,
that incense. It's there's a name for it. I think I put a video on the earlier episode. I could do another one, but I guess the main priest pushes this massive ball of incense on like this huge pendulum that swings to the cathedral, and that's kind of cool. I think they do that once a day, a certain time, and it might be 4:00. And I imagine the cathedral's filled with pilgrims that made it there that day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I did go to the mass at some point after I arrived, all right, and it was very full of pilgrims, and it's really, I suppose, a sense of finality to achieve that final point.
And you don't have to be Catholic or Christian to do this. Some people do it for religious reasons, but a lot of people do it just for the me time or just for their own personal reasons.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm certainly not doing it for spiritual reasons or religious reasons at all. I mean, I'm doing it because I just enjoyed the combination of exercise and the landscape and the opportunity to see different places and meet some different people.
And I read a review from a 70-year-old woman who says she does one every year because that's her me time. And it's all about you during that adventure. Is Santiago a place that you would recommend staying extra time as well?
Yeah, and again, if I was going again, I'd stay a little bit longer. I stayed 2 nights actually in Santiago, and you're tired as well, so it's really nice just to unwind and take it slowly, walk slowly around, looking at the buildings and the streets, and just enjoying sitting out in the various squares, having a beer, a glass of wine, and some tapas.
Are there any other villages that you would recommend if somebody wanted to take a rest day? Say, oh, definitely pick this town.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones was Pontevedra, which is probably 2 days before Santiago on the way. It's where you kind of leave the coast and head through the country up to Santiago. I thought Pontevedra was a city that was really, really nice, and it was a place I'd like to go back to.
Was it because of the architecture, the history, or what's the appeal?
I'm not sure, really. I remember landing into and saying, this is really nice. I mean, it was a traditional old kind of Spanish old town, and it was just a nice atmosphere. Really, I just thought the atmosphere was really nice in it, and enjoyed the peace of the place, I think, in some ways.
Is there anything that you wish you'd known before you went or brought with you?
No, I was happy that I think I had everything I needed. And again, I think the way I did it, organizing it through the Follow the Camino agency, worked really well, and the advice and information was really good. I think I also would have done quite a lot of research in terms of deciding particularly for that first one, which route I would do first. So I was pretty comfortable that I knew what I was getting into.
And do they provide you with a recommended packing list?
They do provide a list, yeah. I'm not sure if I took much notice of it because I'd be pretty good at packing for this sort of a trip anyway. So.
Oh, that reminds me. So I met a gal who was bike packing down the canals in France. And so she just had one bike outfit. Now, she did not have a luggage transfer. So every night she would wash her bike clothes and hope that they would be dry by the morning. How did you do the cleaning of the gear kind of a thing?
Yeah, I didn't actually. Again, if you organize your bag to move every day, you can usually bring enough gear that you don't have to be getting involved in washing. So, and again, for 1 week, I mean, I think if it's going for more week, you'd have to be thinking about that. But I think for 1 week, I'm happy enough to bring enough stuff. And again, if you don't have to carry it yourself, it's not too challenging.
I know when I discovered that when I did the West Highland Way, I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. No, that's a wonderful service. And there's another thing too that Follow the Camino does that you didn't do, but is available. Let's say you wanted to walk and bike, you could a section of it and bike. They can work with you if let's say there's a section that's a lot of roads that may not be as scenic, but you got to get from one place to another. Maybe that's a good section to take the bike so you can zip there quicker rather than walking it. So those are options.
I never thought of that. Yeah, that could work well.
With that in mind, was there a section you'd say, well, you were on the bike the whole time, that you'd say, yeah, this was a better one to bike? It wasn't quite as scenic. It's like either all farmland all day or all just same pasture?
Yeah, no, I prefer to cycle than walk. No, and now for a first time traveler, I think this route is great. Like I said earlier as well, I've also done some of the Camino del Norte as well. Much more challenging actually on the bike. Much more elevation, some more difficult off-road type sections, which would be more suitable for walking and biking, where you have to find alternative routes around. So. But I think the Portuguese Camino, from that point of view, was very, very well set up for cycling all the way.
So is it just like gentle elevation? Because the mountains are gone by this point, correct?
Yes, they are really. There's not much elevation on the Portuguese, which was fine. The only difficulty is, like you had said earlier, is about the wind sometimes. And it wasn't too bad for me, although there were days where in high winds, in a headwind, it was harder. But I could imagine if you got some bad weather, the winds could make it very difficult.
Right. And then again, the public transport can take the bike. So if you just had a really rotten day that just everything was stacked against you, you could just hop on a bus probably.
I guess so. Yeah. I would. Yeah. I mean, the public transport is pretty good in that part of the world. Yeah.
What advice? You seem to be a Camino addict, because as I understand, you're going to be doing another one next chance.
Well, I'm actually booked for one in April. It was originally booked for April last year, and it was postponed till April this year.
So outside of Caminos, any other trips that you're planning on taking or want to take, or what are now's future plans?
Well, this is the trip. The Camino trip is the one I kind of do on my own every year, if possible, at least once. So that's kind of a week, once a year, that I could go and, like you said before, and do have some personal time. Other than that, we have our eldest daughter is living in Vancouver for the last year and a half, and we had planned to go last summer to visit her. So that didn't happen also because of the pandemic. So again, unlikely to happen this summer, but perhaps by Christmas time next year, that might be possible.
That would be nice. And Banff, which I did an episode, I'll put a link in the show notes. That's beautiful year round.
Yeah, well, we had. I'm not sure how easy it is to do in wintertime. We had planned to do a road trip in an RV from Calgary through Banff and across the mountains to Vancouver. So I'm not sure if that's even possible. Is it at that time of the year?
Any final thoughts or any recommendations that you can leave us with about doing any of the Caminos, and particularly biking the Caminos?
No particular recommendations. I keep coming back to it. I think while I really enjoyed the Portuguese Camino, I think I enjoyed more the Camino del Norte, that northern coast of Spain. I found to be exceptionally beautiful, through the Basque region to Bilbao, onto Santander, and across Cantabria to Asturias, which is another Spanish region that doesn't get nearly enough. I think it's a beautiful kind of mountainous, rugged terrain and very scenic.
Yeah, in fact, actually, when I was a child in high school in Oviedo, I spent the summer there as an exchange student. Yeah, so that's a beautiful, not a town, beautiful city. And I'd like to go back. And in fact, I'd like to actually go do the Portuguese route from Porto to Santiago and then go north up to Oviedo. Would be fun.
That was my last one. I ended up in Oviedo from Santander. Yeah, beautiful. Oviedo, I thought was one of the most beautiful cities I've been to yet in Spain. Yeah, fabulous.
Nice. I sure appreciate you coming on the program, and I hope to get you back. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
They can have your luggage transported daily, so all you have to worry about is carrying a day pack. And they provide you with all the maps and instructions to make sure all you got to worry about is just doing your Camino. And good news, Follow the Camino and their sister company, One Foot Abroad, the European walking and biking tour company with whom I did my Slovenia trip. That was episode 105. These two companies offer ADA listeners an exclusive 5% discount off of any of their tours. Just be sure to use the promo discount code ATA5 to get your 5% discount. Again, that's ATA5, ATA5, and get your 5% discount off of any One Foot Abroad or Follow the Camino tours. Between these two companies, you're sure to find lots of great exciting choices for your next European adventure. Lastly, don't forget that you can access the ATA podcast from your smart speaker. Just ask Alexa or Google to play either a specific destination episode or the last show you may not have listened to yet. And please let me know if you like this feature and if you are indeed using it. I'd appreciate it. Thanks. I appreciate you listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.